Hi, my name is Meg Edwards and I'm a GTD coach, and we're doing a series on GTD for beginners. And in this part of the series, I'm going through the 2015 edition of the Getting Things Done book by David Allen. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to go chapter by chapter, but not in chronological order, and kind of pull out what I think are some gems that people may overlook. Um, and so today I'm focusing on chapter 7, which is the organizational phase. Now, the last video I did was on prioritization, which was chapter 9. And what's so interesting about the organizational chapter is that a lot of times when I'm coaching people, they get a little unsettled doing a mind sweep first, capturing everything that has their attention, because there's a little bit of this nervousness about where is it going to go. And so one of the things that sometimes I do as a coach is I start with setting up the organizational buckets so that when they're capturing and clarifying, they kind of already have a sense of what those organizational buckets are. And there's a kind of a nice flow to be able to name that organizational bucket so that when it shows up, when you're capturing and clarifying, you're like, oh, it goes here. Just like the calendar. I always go back to the calendar, folks, that when you are capturing something about having an appointment, that might be a couple of months out, you're not going to leave that on your mind. You're going to capture, clarify, and organize that in your calendar. But then where do all the other things go that don't belong on the calendar? I think David does a phenomenal job laying out this chapter. But what's interesting is that it is 49 pages long. And when I was rereading it, I was like, oh, I really can relate to my clients about how dense it is. And so I think one of the strategies that you might want to take is to really spend a lot of time on this chapter, really dive into it, really understand all of the kind of organizational lists that you might want to create. And then what I recommend is just populate one thing on that list and get kind of comfortable and decide where you want to put that. Are you going to be in folders? Are you going to be in a paper-based planner? If you want to be an electronic list management tool and you don't have one yet, you might want to think about going to the Getting Things Done website, going to the store, looking at all of the setup guides of all the organizational setup guides that they have, and start with something like that versus a tool that may not have one. Or if you're really savvy with the tool, then once you understand the methodology, you can manipulate the tool. I do it all the time. I mean, I coach people all the time and I don't understand the tool that they're using, but we figure it out because we understand the thinking part of it. And then we manipulate the tool to match the methodology. So this is kind of assuming that you already have the tool chosen. And David, and I kind of wrote some notes here so that I could really be very specific here. On page 142, David lists out the basic lists for you to start with. And, again, it's really that project list, that someday maybe list, that next actions list, the errands list, the agendas list, the waiting for list. And then you can decide if you want to expand those lists and have a calls list or have an office list. I mean, could be by topic, could be time frame, but at least start with your basic lists and then populate one thing on that list. And time and time again, those of you who know me, who do these videos, this is really, here it's upside down. This is really your roadmap so that when you are clarifying, which is chapter 6, you then have all of the organizational buckets set up. You have your project list or lists. And David talks about how you might want to have different kinds of project lists. Where are you going to put your project plans, which are, those things that belong with the project or future actions that you don't want to do yet or can't do yet? Where are you going to tuck away those? David discusses that. Then you have your calendar. Then you have your next actions list. You could start off with one, but as David shares, What if you have 60 or 70 next actions? You might want to break them up into different lists, again, by topic, by time frame, or by context. And then you have your waiting for list, and David talks about best practices of that. So that's all the buckets that you want to have when something is actionable. Okay, so you've captured, you've clarified, and then you've organized it. And then on this side of the workflow diagram, these are things that are come up, your stuff that are non-actionable. So you may, toss it or scan it, or you may tickle it, which is a someday maybe, or a tickler system. And David goes into great detail about that, or reference, and he goes into great deal about that. So hang out with this chapter and get your organizational bucket set up. And once you do, it's going to be so much easier to clarify and to organize it. They sit very close together, the clarifying and organizing. So it's dense, but David gives you all of that. And then towards the end of the chapter, he talks about checklists, because maybe when you're capturing and clarifying, you come across something that really belongs on a checklist. And then sometimes you may come across something that belongs on a list. So let's say that you're clarifying and somebody recommended a book to read. Maybe you don't want to make that actionable. I mean, you could just put everything on your someday maybe list. And then from that someday maybe list, you might be able to then say, wait a minute, some of these things on my someday maybe list really belong on checklists, or really belong on discrete lists, like books to read or movies to watch. Or I have a list of all these antique stores that I'd love to visit in Maine. It's just on a list. It's like a someday maybe that I might want to visit it, but it really belongs better on a list. And then David gives this really great gem, which I think people absolutely overlook, which is on page 162. He talks about areas of focus, which is the level above projects. And he talks about that as a checklist, because, a lot of times it might be, I want to be a good mom. Well, it's not really a project. And there's really maybe nothing that's actionable about it. So I want to put that on an area focus list. And he goes into wonderful detail about that. So that's like a really great gem. And I may unpack that a little bit more in future videos, but pay attention to the latter part of the chapter on organization, because he goes into the tickler system and checklists and lists and the areas of focus list. And so, so many people are focusing on the projects and next actions, but there's those little gems at the end of the chapter. So give yourself some time. It's dense. You really want to unpack it, but you're going to get bottlenecked when you're clarifying if you don't have a trusted home to put it. And so he really gives you all these wonderful lists, and then he goes into more details about the best practices of setting up each one of those. So I look forward, as always, to your comments. I hope that you're finding this useful, and I look forward to doing more of these and to unpack each chapter. Thanks. For more GTD resources, please visit gettingthingsdone.com and David Allen's YouTube channel. For more information on GTD coaching, please email us at info@gtdfocus.com or visit our website at gtdfocus.com.